So let's talk to Ted. He, him pronouns from Washington. He called last week, and we're going to have a continuation of that conversation. Today, Ted wants to talk about why he thinks that gender does not exist. Ted, welcome back. You're live on the line. How's it going today?
Hey, Lux. Hey, Ben. Good to talk to you guys.
Yeah.
So, I think gender does not exist, and I think that we shouldn't be irreversibly medicalizing kids based on something that doesn't exist.
I feel like so I'm going to just express really quick a quick frustration that I had with our call last week, Ted, which is it's one thing to present like a general vibes, like gender affirming care is unethical was the proposition that you had last week. And it's almost like a Mott and Bailey or a bait and switch for you to then jump immediately to the trans kids conversation. Cause I just feel like they're kind of different conversations. So like, if you want to talk about whether kids should have access to medical care, that's a different question than does gender exist? We can focus on whichever one you want to focus on right now.
Okay, let's focus on why gender doesn't exist. So I like the phrase, there are two sexes, zero genders, and infinite personality. So I think what you guys refer to as gender is just your personality.
Sure. I mean, I guess it's like a feature of someone's personality, like what kind of man you want to be, what kind of woman you want to be. It just seems. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, but so in this case, what do your genitals have anything to do with that? Like, cause I would kind of agree with that statement. But I'm a gender abolitionist in the sense that I don't think gender or sex should determine anything with your role in society at all. Like it should just be you as an individual, and your gender is just how you think of yourself. But if you are going to take that perspective, like that gender doesn't exist and that sex does, do you think that sex should determine how you interact with society?
No, I think that I'm a biological essentialist. So I think that your sex determines if you're a man or a woman, and I think that doesn't tell you anything about someone. So a man can be whoever he wants to be, a woman can be whoever she wants to be, but you're a man or a woman based on how you were born.
So then why do we need those labels in society? If because you don't get to decide what you're born with, right?
Those labels are just like a doe is a female deer, a man is a male human. We have these in every.
So would you be okay? So would you be okay then if all of those labels were removed and it was just like you had these categories that you fit into based on your body, but those categories didn't really mean anything? How would you feel about that?
Well, I think they don't mean anything. Man means adult human male. That's all it really means.
I didn't know if you wanted to.
I didn't know if you wanted to jump in.
I mean, it's intellectually honest for you to admit to being a biological essentialist. I just want to. That's a refreshing to me.
Yeah. So if every space, like if we didn't have segregated spaces, if we didn't have, like certain cultural norms related to what you had in your pants or whatever, like if everybody was just them, like that would be okay with you, it sounds like.
I think that's where we already are at. Like I didn't grow up in the 1950s.
Except we're not there.
Both my parents were.
Except we're not there. We're not there because we have separate bathrooms. We have separate sports teams. We have separate roles. We have separate societal gender roles. So you think so Ted, so this goes back to exactly what I asked you. So you're contradicting what you told me, because I asked you, does what's in your pants, like does your anatomy determine your role in society? Does that have any like and you said
it doesn't determine your role. I don't think women have to paint their nails and wear dresses and they have to be dainty. I think that it only determines
if you were on a sports team, but if you were going to be on a sports team, what the fuck does your penis have to do with being on a sports team? Why does there have to be the penis team and the not penis team?
Because males have a biological advantage over females. Why do
you're creating a social distinction So I just want to point something out, though. You're creating a socially distinct category in a social space based on biology. So when Ben asks you, do you think people's socially acceptable roles should be dependent on their biology? Your answer is yes.
Well, I think sex actually has use. So we know males are physically different, so they should be playing against males. Why would you segregate sports based on someone's feeling in their head or someone's preference for certain colors?
What if you separate it out based on skill and that's it, and just skill and age, like maybe skill, size, and age? Why would it be? Why would it not work to have sports with skill, size, and age?
Because competition is part of the sport. You want the skill disparity. You just don't want males competing against females.
But you just implied that there was a skill. You just said that males were had a distinct advantage in sports. So you are simultaneously saying that you want disparity in skill, but that the sexes can't play together because there's a disparity in skill. Ted, you need to actually have a logically consistent argument, and you're failing to do that. And I just want to say how laughable that is. It is absolutely not. So Ted, you think that is there? Do you believe that there is do you believe that all males are better at all sports than all females?
No, I believe the average male has an advantage over the average female, just like the average 15-year-old has an advantage over the average 10-year-old. So 15-year-olds couldn't play against 10-year-olds.
Why are people limited to what the averages are? Didn't you say that there were an infinite amount of personalities and like people were individuals? So if you have an individual who is, in the top 90, the top 99th percentile of female athletes, and you put her, let's say they're doing like basketball, and you put that person on the court, it's just a 1v1 match against like the bottom quartile of a man, who's more superior at the sport? Probably who's probably going to do a better job.
Of course, like Peyton Clark is going to destroy me.
So you think, but you still think that do you think in that case the man should be on a separate team because he's better biologically?
No, the man should be on a separate team because he is male. We segregate the sports universally.
But again, Ted, why do they need to be separate? Why do males need to be separate?
Because otherwise, women would never win in any sport. Males would dominate.
So Ted, you don't even know what you're saying right now, because I just gave you an example where the woman would clearly win, and you said that the male would need to be separate because men need to be separate, and men need to be separate because they're inherently better. So Ted, your logic is non-existent right now.
There's cases where some women might win. That doesn't change anything.
Why can't you separate it based on skill? Why does it have to be on biology when clearly some people, even whose genitals are different, are biologically still better than those with the other genitals? Well, I want to be nice to you, Ted, but you're sounding like an idiot.
Why did we make
can you have a logically consistent thought, like, for once in this discussion? I'm gonna let Lux jump in, because
I can answer the question that you just asked, Ted. Why do we have a women's category? The reason why we have a women's category, if you actually look into the historical record of this, is that there used to be no particular gendered rules around things like shooting or what's the other one I'm trying to think of? Figure skating. There used to not be rules around who could participate. It just so happened that because of social pressures, only men were attempting to participate. And then when women started to participate, they would win against the men. And then then there was a rule that said it's men only. And then subsequently, a couple years later, women's categories get established. There was just a story within the last couple years of there was a marathon or a bike race or something that was distinguished between men and women's categories. The men started first and the women started after. And one of the women started to catch up to the cohort of men, and the officials stopped her so that she wouldn't lap the men. these rules exist to preserve an idea of male supremacy. That is why there's this separation. If you give people equivalent equipment, like the biggest sports disparity predictive thing. So one of the ways that we can try to predict sports participation or not participation, performance is by looking at testosterone. But we find when looking at testosterone levels that does not correlate to our actual results as far as who performs the best. If you look at factors like who had better funding when they were younger, who had better coaches, who had better equipment, who had better facilities, those factors are much more significantly predictive of sports outcomes. And so when we look at, so knowing that that is a fact and knowing that it is a fact that women's and girls' sports are underfunded, underappreciated, undersupported, that probably accounts for a huge portion of the disparity in performance in a way that testosterone doesn't. So, again, we're totally off track on a sports conversation now in a conversation about gender, but those are the facts about the sports argument.
So I think that some men might lose to some women. Some 20-year-olds might lose to a really good 13-year-old, but 20-year-olds shouldn't be playing in a U13 league. But regardless, I want to make another point. So,
but again, Ted, that's what. Why? No, Ted. That's why I gave you.
You just ignored what I just said. Also, that basically.
Yeah, it's like I did not say that it would be a free for all with everybody. Like you would still have skill divisions, you'd still have age divisions, and probably if it's like a combat sport, you'd have size divisions.
I think height and weight, height and weight, are the biggest things to equalize. Weight are
the biggest ones. Yeah,
yeah,
and age, and so you can standardize age too, depending on the sport.
Your definition of gender. So here, you guys agree there's three potential definitions for gender. There is gender as a synonym for sex. That gender is just your anatomy and your biology. Then there is the social role view, which is more of a Judith Butler idea that gender, we perform, we participate in it through our expressions, through our feelings, through our culture, through our dress. And then the last view is self-ID, that a man is someone who identifies as a man. Which one of those views do you guys hold?
Well, the last two aren't separate definitions. They're just different. You're saying that gender and gender identity are the same thing, and I would argue that they are not. So I would accept your second definition as like the overarching definition of gender. Like gender is a sociological concept of how you engage with the society around you based on, categories initially made for reproductive anatomy. And then gender identity is a psychological issue addressing your sense of self and your identity. And those are, so I would say for you need to separate out gender from the concept of gender identity. They're not separate definitions of gender. They are completely separate concepts. Your first definition,
well, I would say
I absolutely do not agree with, because again, if you can use the word gender in place, if it's an actual synonym for sex, you should be able to use gender in place of the word sex, and you cannot do that. So they are not synonymous.
Gender was originally synonymous. They are synonymous. Gender was created as a polite term for people that didn't want to say sex because it reminded them of intercourse.
I mean, I haven't looked into that specific etymology of the development of that. I mean, I think that what we're okay, I'll answer your question because you're trying to ask my personal opinion on what is gender. I think that even if the original term gender existed primarily for that purpose, that presently the utility is different, that we are observing different phenomenon. And that's really what this is. My position here is I am observing what is actually happening, and then we're trying to construct language around it rather than constructing a category abstractly and then trying to fit human behavior into abstract categories that are predetermined. We've ended up with these predetermined categories of what is a man and what is a woman. And as much as you or I may dislike it, Ted, there are, let's say, there is a lot of baggage that comes along with being born with a vagina. Let's say, there's a lot of baggage. By that, I mean, your parents are going to treat you a certain way. They're going to treat you differently. They're going to restrict your activities. Your school is going to predetermine for you like what's like, girls do cheerleading, boys play football, and there is no girls football team. Like there are a lot of externally constructed, basically ideologically propped up frameworks around what a person should be like in their social role based on their biology. And you have that same opinion, as I understand it. That's what biological essentialism is. It's this idea that your social existence is determined completely by your biological existence, which I disagree with firmly. I would agree with what Ben was saying, which is that like performance theory and identity kind of are two sides of the same thing. Like they go hand in hand and stand in opposition to biological essentialism. Like the idea that as an observable phenomenon, gender exists separately from sex. Like it's related. Definitely, we can tell that it's related, but it definitely operates independently in some cases.
Well, I would disagree with your guys' view because I think the social role view is just sexist stereotype. It's teaching
Well,
people that a
you can
man
think
and a
that.
woman is
I
something to
agree that there
perform.
are sexist stereotypes, right? But that doesn't
Okay.
change fundamental facts like me having a feeling about what my body should look like and a feeling about how I
Ted, you
exist
have
within those
affirmed
social roles.
you have affirmed sexist
shouldn't we just
stereotypes throughout this call. So I don't no, Ted, I don't want to hear it from you about trying to say that you're in opposition to sexist stereotypes when you've made several of those stereotypes throughout this call. You've already
I
committed to
haven't made
that.
them. I
So
think
don't
that men
pretend.
and women
Don't
are
pretend.
equal biological terms. I think that it tells you nothing about someone's feelings, about their behavior.
Ted, you
It's just a
believe that
term
by
about your
default,
genitalia.
somebody with a penis is better at sports than someone who doesn't have one.
No, I don't think that. I think the average male has an
Then what
advantage
do you
over the
mean
average
when
female.
you say
You
that
believe
you
it?
should
Hold on.
segregate sports by
Yeah.
sex?
You believe it strongly enough that you think that we should have unilateral segregation across all sports. You believe that you
Correct.
believe in sexist stereotypes strongly enough to think that we should have permanent discriminatory segregation.
No, actually, first of all, you guys probably don't know this, but there's no such thing as men's sport. There's open league and there's women's league. So a woman can play in the NBA if she's good enough, but a man cannot play in the WNBA because women's have to have a protected league because they are the disadvantaged group. Anyone can play against the men.
Ted, where do you get your information from?
That's a fact. That's proof.
Oh, you're saying it's a fact. Tell me where you got this information, because I'm calling bullshit on most of what you're saying here.
It's well
No, women are
documented.
not
Men's
currently
league is
allowed to play in the
generally open
NBA,
league.
according to a quick Google search.
Women never get drafted because they're good enough, but they're welcome to play if they can get drafted.
Do you think that maybe, Ted, that might be because of the sexist stereotype belief that women are inferior to men and not actually anything to do with their fucking performance? Like, this is why I have a strong belief that gender is a social construct, because people will suppress female success. They will suppress female excellence to preserve this idea that women, oh my God, they're so weak, they're so tiny, they're so petite, we have to protect them. Rather than something that makes sense, like height and weight divisions. What is the problem with just separating sports by height and weight? And sure, let's add skill and age to make sure that everything's fair. Like, what's wrong with that? Did you know that a girl won? Hold on, Ted. Hold on, real quick. I'm sorry. I gave you a gap there and I meant for you to talk and then I decided to keep talking. Did you know that a girl won the boys wrestling state championship in Arizona like 2 years ago?
Of course. Like I said, Caitlin Clark would beat me at basketball. I'm not denying that there are some women who can beat men, just like there are some 25-year-olds.
There are more than some. There are a lot of them.
There are a
Ted,
lot.
I think
So
you're
why do you
underestimating
believe
the amount of women
There are
that
a
are
lot.
why do you
capable.
believe
But
why do
they're
you
not the
believe
average.
in segregation when you acknowledge that women can beat men? Why do you think that we should continue to segregate by sex when women are able to perform at that same level?
Because there should be a league for separate, just determining the best female basketball player. There should be some sort of category
Why?
for that.
Why should
Then-
there be, like,
because they
Ted, you
deserve
keep
that.
saying things and then
Otherwise,
you're not
we would
giving
never
any evidence to back it up. You're not giving anything substantial to this argument other than claiming that something is a certain way.
Well, I want us to go back to the Lux. You said gender is a social construct. I actually agree with you. I think gender is a social construct. That's why I don't think it exists. That's why sex is so much more.
Do you also
sex the question? Is real and observable.
you left. You got pinned into a corner to actually justify your claims, and then as soon as you realized you couldn't, you went back to a totally different question. Fuck off, Ted. Are you going to engage with us honestly and have a conversation? Or are you going to be a piece of shit and just dodge all over the place?
I haven't dodged anything. I've said the average.
No, then answer my question. Answer our questions then.
Okay, what's the question? Okay,
why
do you have? Yeah.
Why should there be sex segregation across the board if you acknowledge that some women can compete against men and win? Why would you not just default to sex and like height and weight?
Like I said, just because there might be a 25-year-old who's really bad at sports and he might lose to these 13-year-olds, he shouldn't be playing with 13-year-olds.
Ted,
I mean
Ted, that's not at all.
Not an answer to my question.
That's not at all the argument.
If we had, let's say it's by age. So like if you're from ages 20 to 25, you're in the same bracket. If you are from between 5'11" and 6'2", you're in the same bracket. If you weigh 180 pounds, you're in the same bracket. Let's say that we just do it that way. What is wrong with a woman who is the same height and weight as a man having an equal opportunity to perform against that man?
Like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. Women can compete with the men. Just like a 13-year-old can compete up with
that's not true in every sport. That's not true. That's not true, and that's not true in most. Ted, that is not true in most sports. That is not true. There are actually a lot of sports that are requiring like identification, like actual legal identification, in order to compete in certain gender categories. Like this happens in jiu-jitsu. This happens like there are some sports that allow for co-ed, and there are a lot that do not. And so, Ted, your problem, one of your biggest problems here is that, Ted, I don't give a fuck about your statement of generally because you don't know, number one, you don't know how averages work. Number two, you don't know that you can't, just make these generalized statements and then just wipe away any exceptions that you don't agree with, right? So here's the thing, Ted. You have to understand that on this average, like if I try to draw with my hands like the curve, you're expecting that the average for men is over here in like the best, and the average for women is over here, and it's like really bad. The averages are like this. They are so overlapping. And yeah, the super fringe, like super high testosterone, huge guys might be on that other side where it might be unfair for them to compete with like the lowest end of the out of shape females. But keep in mind, there are men probably down at that range too. People have a range of skill, ability in sports. And the other thing too, Ted, is I don't know if you're aware, but sports require a lot of different skill sets. Like skeet shooting is a different sport than horse racing, which is a different sport than basketball, which is a different sport than chess, which is somehow segregated by gender. So
yeah.
You make these generalizations and you try to go off of averages to prove your point. I don't think you understand the stats enough to be making these claims, because if you understood the stats, you'd understand how overlapped these categories are and how nuanced it is to actually separate out by sex and have those unfair advantages like you're saying. So it should be, if we separated it out by skill, age,
there's not a big difference. In
Ted, are you fucking listening?
Females
are you listening?
Strength.
Ted, what did I just say to you? Ted, what did I just say to you?
Said that the
repeat it back to me in your own words.
You said the averages were pretty close. That's what you said. Moving on, I want to talk about, you said conversion therapy.
No, repeat back. What did I say? What was my point there? And then respond to my point that I made.
Pretty close. Yeah, you said the averages are pretty close. So you mentioned
I said the curves overlap.
This isn't
the curves overlap, right?
Conversion therapy is about gay marriage, not about.
Ted, you're not engaging anymore. I'm dropping you. Like he didn't even respond back to that. Like he just went off on his own thing. Ted, I want you to go take a fucking math class, Go take a fucking biology class. Stop pretending to know shit that you don't, because like you don't know the shit. It's clear that you don't. Stop making arguments you don't understand.
It was a lot of shifting the goalposts. Like it's like, even when he first got on, it's like, okay, your stated thing, what you told my call screener was that you want to talk about the idea that gender doesn't exist. But then the immediate thing he said was, and therefore we shouldn't give kids medical care. And so like the entire conversation is just like, well, like once you run into a wall and you can't defend and you would have to concede, then you just move to something else. And so it's like really difficult. I felt like our conversation last week was so much more constructive with Ted. Like, I don't know why it's so difficult to stay on track. I mean, I know why. It's because like you, at a certain point, you do run into that wall and go like, oh, and like the frustrating thing too about this, whenever we have this sports conversation, is that it's not even a conversation about trans people. It's a conversation about male supremacy and like and like having to fight against the idea that women are inherently inferior. And like we don't even get to talk about like, and by the way, even if men were superior, trans women aren't the same in their performance as men.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and with this whole thing, like the one thing that I can say is inherently one thing or another is that like biological essentialism is inherently an incoherent position. It is like you cannot take that position and be logically consistent. And that's like what we're trying to tell you. Like that's what we do pretty much every week on this show, is debunk biological essentialism. And like, that's what we get to. There's no way to hold that position and be consistent in every one of these scenarios.
Yeah. I'm just really frustrated. I'm still kind of like trying to cool down a little bit from that. Cause this
is why I'm day drinking.
Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Did you know we saw what you were doing when you watched it?
We saw all of it. All of it. All of it.
So you're going to want to pay us hush money over at patreon.com/calltheline, where you can buy our silence and watch our patron exclusive podcast.